Are you considering a move to the suburbs of Albuquerque, New Mexico? We're going to go through the pros and the cons of two of the main suburbs that I think people consider: the city of Rio Rancho and the northwest section of Albuquerque. These two areas offer similar amenities, similar real estate prices, and you also have to commute across the river. Let's get started. I always talk a little bit about history, and so I briefly want to get into how Albuquerque has grown, because that's what's led to the growth of Northwest Albuquerque and Rio Rancho. First of all, Northwest Albuquerque is the area north of Interstate 40 on the south side, up to Rio Rancho on the north side, up to the Pueblos on the west side, and then on the east side, the Rio Grande River. Rio Rancho is similar. The east portion is Corrales up into the river and Bernalillo up north, the Pueblos north, and then west out to the Pueblos, and south northwest Albuquerque. Albuquerque really grew from Old Town out to these areas. So in the 10s and 20s, we grew into downtown, then along Borealis into the South Valley, and up north into the North Valley. From there, we grew into Nob Hill, Northeast Heights in the 40s to the 80s, and now finally we are growing from about the 80s, 90s, and until now still into Northwest Albuquerque and Rio Rancho. Housing in Rio Rancho and the west side of Albuquerque typically are suburban neighborhoods that are developed into a little less than quarter-acre lots. You do get newer construction than you will find in most of the city of Albuquerque because these communities are still growing. Typically, builders have 4 or 5 floor plans and facades, and so as you drive around, you'll see roughly the same. There are a number of custom home communities in both Rio Rancho and Albuquerque. The West River Valley is the most prominent luxury home area on the west side of Albuquerque. You have Oxbow, which is just behind St. Pius High School and has these stunning views of the river and then the landscapes up into the Sandia Mountains. There's also Black Farm Estates, which is situated just off of Paseo and the Rio Grande River, where you can get 1-acre lots and a little bit more space and plenty more square footage. Finally, on top of the petroglyphs and the West Mesa, you have these custom homes that are roughly on 1/3 of an acre. They are not as high-end as Black Farm Estates or Oxbow, but certainly an area where you can get a little more customization. In Rio Rancho, there are different neighborhoods and nooks that you can get suburban areas. And then as you get further north, we get into larger lots, half-acre to a full acre. And in these areas, you can find a modest 2,000 square foot home next to a huge 4,000 or 5,000 square foot house. You're looking at real estate. That's one thing that's a little bit different from Rio Rancho and the west side of Albuquerque, is that Rio Rancho doesn't have quite as much rhyme or reason to the developments at this moment. Because of the slow growth over the last 20 to 30 years, Albuquerque and Rio Rancho still has a lot of great investment opportunities. There are tons of parcels of land for sale, particularly in Rio Rancho. You can buy a half-acre lot for $3,000, and you can sit on it and wait for that to become a development in the future. Currently, the city of Rio Rancho average price per square foot for sold properties in 2022 was $185. Sold price, $360,000. Square footage, 1977, 3.5 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms. West side of Albuquerque, the price per square foot for sold properties in 2022 was $188. Sold price, $386. Square footage, a little bit more than Rio Rancho at 2,069, 3.5 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. So we've really only gone through custom home communities so far, like North Albuquerque Acres and Los Ranchos, where the average price per square foot was above $250 and the square footage was a lot higher. Even if you just compare to those two, you see the deals that you get in Rio Rancho and the west side of Albuquerque at a much lower price per square foot and overall sold price. Something to consider between the west side of Albuquerque and Rio Rancho are property taxes. Albuquerque, the property tax for a $500,000 home is just under $6,000, and in Rio Rancho it is $4,350. So you do get a little bit of a tax break in the city of Rio Rancho. The main factor that people consider when moving to the west side of Rio Rancho are commute times into Albuquerque, where typically most people work. In Rio Rancho, there are great opportunities to work at Russ Presbyterian Hospital, Sandoval Regional Medical Center. There's a CNM and a Westside UNM campus. There's also Intel and other options, but typically most people are going to commute across the Rio Grande River into Albuquerque. And so this means during rush hour traffic, you are going to add probably 10 minutes or so to your commute. Here are commute times from Rio Rancho up to Sandia Peak Tramway if you want to go for a hike or to the top of the mountain. This is pretty far into Rio Rancho. There are certainly areas that this commute would be a lot less. Downtown, we're at about 35 minutes. This is not during rush hour. Times during rush hour. From the west side of Albuquerque, we're going to go a little bit further on the west side on top of the mesa at Ventana Ranch Park. We're about a 20-minute commute to downtown and a 25-minute commute to Sandia Peak Tramway. Now here are the times during rush hour. A complaint or con that I hear at times from people living in these areas is that there's not as much to do as there is in the city of Albuquerque. I had a hard time coming up with a way of describing this, and I still am not super happy with this, but what I did is I searched for restaurants on the west side of Albuquerque. You can kind of see they're all along the Rio Grande River, up into Cottonwood Mall at the top right corner of this map, where you see Texas Roadhouse and BJ's. In Rio Rancho, they're closer to the Cottonwood Mall down at the bottom of this map. Get some nice options in Corrales, New Mexico, which is this section roughly between the river on the right-hand side and the Heaven Dragon restaurant. Now, this was my idea to try to compare. Again, I'm not super happy with it, but here we go. When you look at Nob Hill downtown, uptown in Albuquerque, there are plenty more options that pop up, and as you zoom in on these sections, more and more appear. There have been recent developments in Rio Rancho that are promising for the future. There is a Tin Can Alley or Green Jeans option going in by Russ Presbyterian Hospital. That whole corridor is supposed to become an area where you can go eat, play, drink, and shop soon. There's also a golf course that was acquired by a developer that should be developed into something in the future. We're not entirely sure on his plans yet, but he says it won't be a golf course. So on the west side of Albuquerque, I must point out Petroglyph National Monument, a great place to enjoy nature, go out for a hike. Let's briefly talk about crime. Again, these are not my opinions. This is data from Neighborhood Scout. When you look at the west side of Albuquerque, you notice that you see a lot more lighter colors, which at the bottom of the graph says that it is safer areas. What's interesting is the mid blue colors or purple that you see in the middle. These areas are the Petroglyph National Monument, and so there aren't any houses. I assume this data is based on a per capita basis, and so when you don't have anyone living in these areas and you get a few crimes, it's going to say that these are more dangerous. Now, I'm unable to get this crime data specifically for the west side of Albuquerque, but for Rio Rancho, because it is its own city, this data is available. It says crime rate per 1,000 residents is 1.88. If you look at the safest Rio Rancho neighborhoods, you notice that the further away from everything you get, the less crime occurs. Now, it's hard because you look at these most dangerous areas and they look concerning, but again, Rio Rancho has a lower crime rate than the city of Albuquerque. Schools are also highly rated on the west side of Albuquerque. You can see the darker purple sections are very similar to what you see in the Northeast Heights. Rio Rancho schools are highly rated. This map isn't super helpful because it's not able to compare to the rest of the city of Albuquerque. There are a few private schools on the west side that are prominent here in Albuquerque. St. Pius X High School is a Catholic school. And then we have Bosque School, which is just along the Rio Grande River. I would say that this private school is more nature-oriented. Some of the activities and learning opportunities that kids get to have at this school being along the Rio Grande River. All right, that's most of the information that I could gather to give to you about Rio Rancho and the west side of Albuquerque. These are two suburbs that a lot of people consider for lower price per square foot, better schools, lower crime, a little bit more space, and newer construction as the city of Albuquerque has expanded. Consider that commute times will be a little bit longer into work in Albuquerque, and that there's maybe a little bit less to do. And so with all things considered, I hope this was helpful as you make a decision. If you have any questions, please give me a call, 505-604-7826, and we will see you on the next video.